Right. Okay, so I got something new to talk about today. It's about how to break up a program or an app into multiple parts, particularly breaking up into multiple apps. We don't have the ability to build libraries, not in App Inventor. So sometimes, if you have something that you want to share amongst all of your apps, if you're building multiple apps, and you don't want to copy and paste or have to use a common base in order to start your project, because sometimes you can do that. You can basically have a template called my subroutines or whatever, and then you can start all of your apps from the same source. But what if you add something to it? Then it's not added automatically to all the other apps. Yep, go ahead.
Is it recording?
It is being recorded, yes. Or let me double check. Yep, it turned on by itself. I set up a little timer. So anyway, so what I'm talking about now is a way to share code, but using the activity starter to basically start with another app to one to act as a helper and one as a helpee, or the one that is requesting the help. When I start up App Inventor today, this morning, I didn't see this yesterday, last night, like as in 11 p.m. or so. So this is fresh, this is new. So apparently for Windows, now App Inventor 2 supports, except for Internet Explorer, now it supports built-in USB connection and also emulator. I have not tested this because I just got this message today, and I normally do not even use Windows, so I would not be a person to tell you whether this works or not. I just noticed the last part here, which is support for Linux is coming soon. Now, how come Linux is always the last to get supported? Mac OS X gets it first, and then Windows, and then Linux. Now, I have a very good, perfectly good explanation for all of this. It makes perfect sense, because people who use Linux already have a workaround. They don't need the hand holding that people who normally use Mac OS X, which needed the most hand holding, and then Windows, who need the second most hand holding, and then Linux people for many months already have been able to do development without any help from the app itself, from the development environment itself. So I think that's the only perfect or good explanation why Linux is the last to get supported. It may be the easiest to implement, but it's the last to get the support. So anyway, we're going to be fine. All right. So this is the app here. This is the helper. No, excuse me. This is the helpee, which is the program that is going to request help. So let me just kind of show you what it looks like. In fact, I probably want to zoom in just a little bit so that we can see the code a little bit better. So I'm switching to blocks here. It has a button, and this is pretty much it. When button 1, which is the help button, is clicked, I have to set up all of these things. Let me show you, just zoom out one level to show you what type of activity starter property I have to set. The first one is activity starter 1, activity package, and the second one is the class. These two are closely related. The activity package has to be App Inventor, all in lowercase, dot AI in lowercase, underscore, and then followed by your name. Okay, this is your login name to log into to Gmail. So if your name is something else, you will have to use that. And I believe it is case sensitive.
Student ID.
Sorry?
Student ID. If you use
Student ID, yep. If you use your student ID to sign into your app's account at Los Rios, then you have to use student ID. And then the last part is the name of the project, and it is also case sensitive. So if your project is named Test Helper but with lowercase, then you will have to use all lowercase. Yep.
I always found that weird by adding your username but not appending the at Gmail. Anyone who could mine that information could probably guess.
Yeah.
For
Well, they
anyone
can
downloading the source code.
Yeah, they can get your name, but they can't really do much about your account though.
No, they could find your email address.
Yeah.
I have a message.
Okay, so the first one is the package itself, which is without screen one. The second one, which is activity class, has to be dot screen one as well. And screen one is hard coded because screen one cannot have its name changed in App Inventor. So that's why screen one is just in other words, activity class is really just activity package, but with dot screen one appended to it. Now, what makes this kind of a little bit more interesting is what do we do, with extra value, extra key, and result name. Now, if you want the two activities to exchange information, in other words, if you want the other activity to be also an App Inventor app, and you want these two to communicate by passing information to the other app and getting information or result back from the other app, you have to set up extra key, which is this item here, to exactly app underscore inventor underscore start, all uppercase. If you want the other app to be able to pass result back to you, you also have to set up result name to exactly app underscore inventor underscore result. So these two, must be hard coded. The only part that you can specify, which depends on what you want the other app to do, is extra value. Extra value has to be something that is text, and you are passing that along to the other app. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is to spin this project off, and so I'm not going to change this one. I will save it as in a different name, and I'll call this simple. Okay, there we go. And I think it changes its name to simple right away. It opens the new app, which is the copy of the other one, and this one is, the simple one. And what I'll do is I'm going to change this program a little bit, and remove this one here. I'll just make it very simple. I'm going to pass an extra value of something that's simple to the other app, and then the other app will have to reply back with another message. So I'm going to make this as simple as possible. So right here, I'm just going to pass along a text string of this comes from the helpee, the program that is requesting help, or if you want to, we can just say requester. There we go. All right, so we're just passing a string with the content of this comes from the requester to the other app, which is test helper. Let's go ahead and build this app first and see what happens when we run it without the helper app already installed on the other side. Because we want to see the message first so that oh, okay, if I see this message, it means the requested app is not installed or is not available. I'm just going to get my command line tool ready over here. Alright, so I'm going to save test helpee simple I think to my temp folder, and we'll go ahead and install it onto the virtual device without the helper. So now I'm in the Android device, look for help test helpee simple, and then click ask for help, and it says no corresponding activity was found, which makes perfect sense because I have not installed the other app yet. Okay, so this is the first app. Let's take a look at the second app. Okay. The other thing is, let me just finish this program first. After you set up all the 5 attributes, then you have to click. You have to use the start activity to start the activity on the other side. In other words, once you execute this purple block here, then the other app will get execution. I think this app is still active after this, depending on which version of Android you're using, but it won't be at the it won't be in the foreground anymore. Okay, the other app will become the foreground. When the activity has ended, this event will be triggered. After activity will get triggered, and you will get a result if the application is returning a result. So what I'm going to do here is to make this a little bit simpler and just display the result from the other side, just like that. Okay, and I need to rebuild this. Okay, I'm just going to quickly rebuild it and re-upload it, and then we can look at the helper side, which is the app that is actually responding to the request and actually do something. Now this can potentially be useful because now you can actually develop quote-unquote libraries, but it is not simple because when you invoke or when you call out to the helper, you have to use a purple block, but you cannot just say, okay, I'll continue execution, because if you're waiting for the result, then you have to stop until you get the result back from the other side. So you have to chop up your program into more parts, but you have now the flexibility of not having to put all the logic into one single app, and it's easy to share logic in this case. So I'm gonna re-upload the app first, just so that we have the helpee or the requesting application done. Now we can go ahead and look at the other side. This means go to my projects. I already have the helpee application. Oops, that's the other one. I need the helper. Okay, there we go. Alright, this is the helper application, and you can see that it doesn't even have anything on screen. We can go ahead and change this a little bit just so that we can show the result, from getting call from the other app. So the only thing I really need to add is a notifier will work, just fine. Okay, let's look at the blocks here. And the blocks are over here. Okay, this block already illustrates, what it's going to do. And the way it is right now is it doesn't stop to display anything. It will just basically get the message from the requester, do something about it, and reply and close the screen right away. Okay, so that's not going to be very helpful, in order to demonstrate what this can do. So what I'll do is I'm changing the app here a little bit, and let me go ahead and save it. It's a different name. And this is the complex one. I will change the name back because the requester is already requesting for the one with a simple name, so I have to go back to the simple one in order for that one to run. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to take this block out entirely, and instead I'm going to, okay, it's missing the blocks here. Okay, so instead what I'll do is I'm going to use the notifier so that we know that we are invoked by the other one with a start value of a certain content. So I'm going to put this one here, and the message is just going to be the start text from the other side, from the other application. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and change the title. Okay. And then the button text is really just to say, okay, I got it, we can close the screen now. Okay. But this is not going to pass anything back to the original app, okay? But that's okay, we'll just do it the way it is right now, and then we'll change the program to actually return something back to the first application, the one that is requesting the help. So let's go ahead and build it, and then we'll upload it and run it on the run it inside the emulator.
Side note, I tried the emulator in Windows. It comes up, but it says companion version check. The companion you're using is not compatible with the version of AI2.
Is that because you install the helper or the companion setup from version 1?
No, it's a full 100 megabyte package that includes the emulator as well, just out date. From day one.
Oh. Well, this method seems to work well. Completely getting around the limitation. Okay, so now I'm going to install, helper into the emulator, and then rerun the emulator here. Okay, now in the emulator we can see two apps already installed. The first one is test help simple, which is the requester. Okay, this is the app that is requesting something from the second app. The second app is called test helper in this case. So we'll go ahead and run test help simple, because test helper is not going to do anything really useful. You can run it by itself, and all it does is to say, oh, start text is nothing. Okay, there's nothing in the start text, so it doesn't really do anything useful. But if you start test help simple and then click ask for help, then it is passing this string along to the helper application. So this comes from the requester, is the string that I specify as a start value from the first application. Okay, I click got it, and then I click the back button. Now remember, this one does not pass anything back. When it closes the application, it does not close it with a particular result value. So when I close the helper application, nothing is passed back to the other one. So the other app doesn't show anything because it's not actually getting anything from the first app. Are we doing okay so far with the concepts? Okay, so at this point I have just verified that I can pass information from the requesting app to the app that is responding to the request, the helper one. So the next question is, how do we pass something back? Okay, so to pass something back, we are currently in the helper app. So to do this, we can respond to, let's say when back is pressed, when the back button is pressed, then we'll go ahead and close the screen with plain text. This is something that is a restriction. You can only use close screen with plain text, but not close screen with value. The difference between these two is if you choose the first one, it can return a list. The second one can only return plain text. In other words, with the second one, there's no type information associated with the return value. It is just a string. I don't know why the first one works because within the same app, it works just fine. But with different apps, it does not work. If you have different apps, you have to pick this one, which kind of limits what you can do with the result. But I can explain to you, there is a way to do it. It's just not easy to pass along, just any type of information that you want to pass along. So I'm going to put a text here and say this comes from the helper app. This is all that I'm passing back to the first app, and I just want to verify that the first app can get to this part. So I go to build again and rebuild my helper app in this case, and then have it uploaded. Then I'll switch back to the helpee, the requester app, and then change that one as well. Without specifying close screen with plain text, it's not even passing anything back to the other one. So the event does not even get triggered. So we need this one to be like this in order for the first app to get triggered. So this is helper. I'm going to overwrite my helper.apk file and then reinstall just the helper. The helpee is already set up to interpret the result from the helper app here. So when I go back to my emulator and just rerun test helpee simple, I click ask for help. This app says, okay, I'm getting the start text value, and this comes from the requester. Click got it. This app doesn't do a single thing, so the only thing I have to do here is to do a press the back button so that we pass control back to the first one. And the first one this time, says, oh, okay, when the other app closed in the activity starter event, now it gets triggered because I'm getting a result back from the second application, and it says this comes from the helper app. So now we have a two-way communication. We can go from an app, start up another app, pass information to the other app, and then we can also pass information back from the other app. So I just click, got it, and that's the end of this really, really simple application demonstration. So the next question now is, okay, great. We can pass a string from one app to the other app, start up the other app can intercept the start value, and they can pass something back to the first app. How is that going to be helpful, right? And that's the first question. Well, the first thing we do is we go to the helper app to make it quote-unquote automatic. So we are not going to do anything with the helpee or the requester app. We're going to do something to the helper app here, and we'll make it automatic. This is not automatic at this point. In other words, it takes a lot of user interaction to pass something back. The first one is to respond to the notifier box and say, okay, we have to click the got it button. And then the second one is we have to press the back button in order for the close screen to occur. So one thing you can do is to move it over here. In other words, it's within the same steps. Okay, as soon as I click got it in the notifier dialog box, it will automatically close the second app, the helper app, so that the first app will get the result. Okay, now I'm keeping this part here only to show you that we can still get the string from the first one. So I'm going to keep it here just so that we can confirm that yes, we get the start value from the first app. But even that is not required. Okay, you can basically just short. We'll take a look. When we're done with this, I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. You can automate this whole thing so the second app doesn't even show on the screen, which is what we want. And by the way, this is in a way similar to DLLs. How DLL works in Windows. It's not exactly the same, because it's still asynchronous, which means the two apps actually run they run concurrently at the same time. All right, so this is almost there. This is the helper, so we're going to override the helper.apk file. Go back to the command line, reinstall the helper. Go back to the emulator. And this is the helper, saying that this comes from the helper. Oh, okay. Yep, this comes from the helper app. The other one, just closed automatically. It did not pop up the dialog box.
It's not supposed. Not supposed to.
Not supposed to? I don't know. It did call notifier. You should stop.
Unpause, right? Unpause.
Yeah, but only after. It should only activate the next line of code after you clicked OK.
Yeah.
Or got it.
Yeah, it basically ran through the second line right away and not stop at all.
Maybe it just shows it and continues on. And but since it continued on, it just left it already.
A notifier has these two inputs, but I don't think okay, this is show choose dialog, but I did not choose that, right? I chose show message dialog, so it's not a choice. It should have stopped. And
I'm thinking it may have did this. It prompted, but continued on, even though it's still waiting for the user interaction.
That's probably what happened. That's the only way to explain it. Okay.
Because it's just like a little notification, not an actual stop right there.
Yep. Okay, so that is that. Okay, so now we have a way to pass information to bounce it back. Okay, how do we make sure that because the show message dialog box did not actually open? So is there a way to confirm that yes, we actually got what the first app sent to me? Well, that's a quick and easy way to do it. Quick, easy, and dirty. Okay, so we go to text here. We just use join. We join the two strings. So we use control to go to get start plain start text here. So this way we are appending our reply to the request itself, and it should be apparent from the first app that we are getting the second app is getting the information from the first app itself. Okay, so we'll go ahead and build it again. Okay, as App Inventor is rebuilding the app, now we have to think about how to actually make use of this feature, right? because we can only pass text strings, to and from the two apps. So the question now is, how are we going to actually make use of this
Right there.
to do something useful?
List to CVS row. You have like list to CVS row list.
Your previous block that you had.
Yep. But that one, even that one is incomplete as an answer. I'll show you guys, what would be quote unquote more complete. Okay, so I'm gonna reinstall helper. And this time when I ask for help, it will the other app will not even display on screen. Well, okay, I guess it displayed really quickly. And the second app reply back with, this comes from the helper app, but it's appending that in addition to the string that they got from the first app, and that's why we see what we're seeing here. This comes from the requester, which is the string that I'm passing to the helper app, and then the helper app is joining the two strings with the result of, this comes from the helper app. So I know that two-way communication now works, for sure. Okay? All right. So now that we can get it up to this point, it is a good time to think about, well, but how do I get the second app to do actually do something? Okay, so this is what we can do, but it has limitations. Okay, this approach definitely has limitations, and I'll show you what the limitations are in just a little bit. Okay, so I'm still going to test help simple, but this time I'm going to change it a little bit. This time I'm going to say, I want my helper app to add numbers for me. Okay, in other words, we'll start with something simple. Okay, we're not going to say, okay, let's do all this complicated processing and whatnot. I just want the second app to perform addition. I just wanted to add two numbers. That's all I wanted to do. Okay. In other words, I'm going to change the request string here. Instead of just saying, oh, this comes from the requester, which is more like a flag than anything else, I'm going to have to specify the name of the operation and then the values that it has to operate on. So, what do you think I can do here to get this to work? Assuming the requester and the helpee, they're coordinated. Okay, so the helper and the helpee, they understand the same language. So now I can actually, quote unquote, invent my own language to specify the operations. What do you think would be a good way to do this? I just want the second app to add two numbers, but it's requested, the operation is requested from the first app. The easiest way I can think of is to make use of lists. And App Inventor has a bug, which is these blocks sometimes will not show up. I have to flip-flop between designer and blocks in order for it to show up. So what I will do in this case is I'm going to use a list, and I will make use of a conversion ability, which is from list to CSV row automatically. And then the list itself, I'm just going to make a list here. The list itself is going to have exactly 3 items. The first item will specify what operation I want to do. The second one and the third one will specify what I'm actually adding in this case. So I'm going to specify, let's say the first one, I will specify either the add symbol itself, that's fine, because as long as the two apps can agree on the same thing, it will still work. The second one is going to be a number. So I'm going to specify, let's say we want to add 36 as one number and 71 as my second number. There we go. So what I'm doing here is I'm still passing a string, by the way. I'm still passing a string as an extra value to the second app. But the string is the result of the conversion from a list to a comma separated value row. And the list itself has an add symbol, a number 36 and a number 71. So it has exactly 3 items. So this is how I'm going to send over the request. Well, before I do anything else, maybe I should just run this by itself so I can see what the other side is seeing before I actually do any type of programming on the other side. So I'm going to rebuild the helpee, or the one that is requesting help, just to make sure that the right string gets passed along. Okay. Now I have tested all of this stuff at 1 a.m. this morning, so I know it all works. But I do want to show you the process of how to get something like this to work. It is just step by step. Don't make any assumptions, because otherwise the app will be very difficult to debug, especially now it involves having two apps to work with each other. All right. Because I was myself, running into this problem. Okay, I keep writing new code, new libraries and better ways of doing things, but I can't incorporate. There's no copy and paste between applications, not even between screens in App Inventor, and it doesn't have the concept of a library. It cannot say, okay, here's a library. I want to link, quote unquote, link my application against these libraries. So every time I want to use one particular subroutine across all of the applications that I have written, it's a problem. I mean, it really is not easy to get it done. So this is one way to get around that problem, but it has limitations. I'll show you what the limitations are just a little bit. We have got some warnings and some errors. I think it will still work. I think it just has to do with these dangling stuff. Still has not asked me where to download the file. Okay, we can delete all of this stuff. You can see that I have been working on.
There's a missing block. Go down a bit. Right there. Set result to.
That's okay. It's just a warning. Looking for the red ones. But it did compile the first time, so that's not the issue. Let me try again.
You still can copy one screen to another screen.
Oh, you can copy.
You can use like source code, just name the screen the same, and just copy, like unzip. And just copy.
So you're saying that if I open two tabs, with two different screens, I can copy and paste it across?
No.
I think he's referring to downloading the source and modifying the screen name.
Oh,
so you
okay.
have the blocks of the.
Okay, so you have to hack the source code basically.
Yeah. That's easy.
Okay. Well, this is what I want to do. Is to have basically runtime linking in a way. This is the second one. It's the same file. All right, so now we've got that running. I'm reinstalling the helpee. Okay, the one that is requesting help or to be helped. Okay, so I'm going to click that one here. Click ask for help, and this is what is coming back to me, which makes perfect sense because it is a comma separated list with an addition symbol. 36 and 71, they're all double quoted. This comes from the helper app. That's really just what the helper app is returning. It's just that what is the requesting statement, and also the literal string of this comes from the helper app. So everything is working the way it's supposed to, so now I know the helper app is getting the list correctly. Now we have to go to the helper app and change it so that it will return the correct result, with the addition operation done correctly. So now I switch back to the helper application and say, well, don't just join the start text with this string here. That's not what I want to do anymore. So what I want to do is I want to actually parse the request input and do whatever is needed. Now is a good time. You can see the bug here. The blocks are all missing. So I'm going to switch back from designer back to blocks, and then the blocks will reappear. So what I'll do is I'm going to write a procedure to do all this stuff here, because it is just a good idea to separate that logic from initialize and turn it into its own procedure, and it's going to return a result here. Okay. Let's see. I will just go ahead and use local variables. In other words, I'm going to use a local variable block here, and I will have a result that is not initialized because it depends on what is the request. The procedure is going to be process request. That's the name of the procedure. It's going to require exactly one input, which is the request itself. So I'm going to change this one to request. So now I have the name of the procedure is process request. It has one single parameter, which is request, and it has a local variable at this point called result. So now close screen with plain text is no longer just that. I'm going to say, oh, if to return the result, I'm going to call process request. The start text value is going to be the request itself. It is a string that specifies what the helper application is supposed to do. Okay, so now I have a little framework here. The framework is just saying, okay, when this helper app gets requested, it was first go to process request to see what it has to do, and then that in return will give me the result to pass back to the application that is requesting an operation. All right. Now we go to control and we pick do result block here so that we can use local variables in the do part, and then the result is just going to be get result. Okay, so I have this block here to specify what operation I want to perform. All right. Go ahead.
You need the list. Create a list.
I have to recreate the list first. So I got several ways to do this, depending on whether I can assume that it's going to be a list. Okay, whether request is going to be a CSV version of a list. If I can make that assumption, I can actually do something here and go to lists here, and then immediately go to list from CSV row, and then I'm just going to say, you know what, request. Oops, I got the wrong one. I need a new parameter. The new parameter is request list, and it is going to be a list that is generated by the request. So what I'm doing here is undoing the original information, which is list to CSV row from the other app. I'm now reversing it back into a single list. Now that I have reversed it back into a single list, I can do some testing here. So I'm going to use a conditional statement block here to basically say what kind of operation was requested and how I should process that request. So in this case, since I only have one type of request at this point, I only have to check for that. In other words, I'm going to go to text here and check for equality. And what I'll be checking would be the first item in the list. So I go to lists here and click select list item. And the list itself is request list. Index is 1 because it's the first item in the list. And I'm comparing that with the addition symbol, because I'm using that to specify the addition operation.
Equal.
And specify equal here. So now I have a condition. When this condition is true, then I know somebody else requested me to add 2 numbers. That's basically what it is. Well, in that case, I can set my result accordingly. So I can go to result and say set result 2. In this case, we go to math, specify the add operation, and then we have 2 select item here because we need a second and a third item. So I can, I'm just lazy, copy and paste. So, and both of these would be coming from the request list, but one is corresponding to index item 2, which is the second item in the list, and one is corresponding to item number 3, and that will set the result to that thing, and the subroutine is going to return that result, and that result will in return be used as the result plain text from this entire application, so the other app will get it. Are there any questions at this point? Do we really have to go through that much trouble just to add 2 numbers? Well, it's a proof of concept. I want to show you guys, it can be done this way, because the helper app can do something far more complicated than what we are showing here. So we'll go ahead and rebuild the helper app first, and then we'll do something else. Now, I do have one question here. Okay, the question is, remember all those double quotes? In other words, 32 and 71, those are basically strings too. Can we really add strings as if they are numbers? And the answer is yes. Okay, in App Inventor, it can do automatic type conversion. If you have a string like 32 or 32, it can be interpreted as a number correctly, and it can do it automatically. Now, I would not do something like this in a production program. I would do a lot more type checking and all kinds of checking first. But since this is just a proof of concept, I can do something like this. So I'll go ahead and reinstall the helper app, and then go back to my emulator. And without even having to rerun or restart my requester or the help P application, I now get a result of 107, and I think that's correct, right? I cannot remember what number I was trying to add. Yep. So now we have a very simple way to communicate, from one application to the next. Okay, and you can pass along, all kinds of stuff. It's just a matter of agreement between the first app and the second app. Are we still doing okay so far? So now I'm going to show you a limitation of this approach, something that does not work. Okay? Okay. So let's go back to the requester app first, and then I'll show you something that does not work in this case, and there's a reason why it does not work. And unfortunately, I cannot find a simple solution to that problem. All right, so we know that addition is now working. Hey, not a problem. So we got that. What I want to show you is this. Okay, so instead of putting these numbers like here, what if I just specify a list of numbers so I can add the list of numbers here. Okay, which doesn't seem like a big change of the original program, because I'm just saying, oh, let's make this more general. Okay, in order to make this more general, I'm gonna make the numbers that I'm supposed to add its own list. Okay, so this way it is a lot more flexible, and I can just say 21 is a number that I want to add, and without even making this 3 items, I just want to make 2 items here, and then the second one is, oh, I don't know, 56. Okay, there we go. So I'm just changing the format here, and I'm assuming if I can, on the other side, if I can make appropriate changes to interpret whatever is after the add symbol to be a list, I should be able to do it just fine, right? I mean, because we're just converting the strings here. All right, so now I'm done with this one. I'm going to go to build. So I don't have to come back and rebuild this one, after rebuilding the other one.
So you have something like a list to CSV table?
If an item in a CSV row is a list itself, that doesn't get encoded correctly. Yeah, that is the problem. Save and upload the helpy application first. If I run it now, it's not going to work for sure because the other end is not adjusted yet. So I'm going to go to the other end first, adjust it, and then say, well, it should work now, but it's not going to. Okay, so I'm getting back to here, and according to this, if the conversion from the CSV row back to a list works exactly correctly, then I should be able to modify just set result to the addition. I can just change it a little bit and make it work. In other words, what I can do here is I can there are two ways to do it. One way is to stack up select item, because I have to now select the second item from request list, which is its own list, and then have select the first item from that list here. So that's one way to deal with that. But my blocks are all missing, so I have to do the same thing here to kind of fix that problem. So I have a different select list here. I'm going to take this as the list, and I'm going to select the first item out of it. Take out the other one completely, copy and paste it, and put this one into the second one, and change the index to 2. Okay, so does everybody understand what this means?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a list. I'm taking the second item off that list, which that item by itself is a list too, and I'm selecting the first item out of the embedded list. And this one is doing about the same thing, except it's taking the second item out of the embedded list. So assuming everything is working the way it's supposed to, including list from CSV row, then this should work the same way as before, okay? Even though I'm using a list inside a list in this case. So I'm going to build it, and then upload it, and then we'll see whether this works or not. I already know what kind of error I'm gonna get. But we'll go ahead and take a look, and then we'll see. We'll say, but why is it getting the error? And I've been thinking about this, the whole weekend, but I really could not come up with a quick and easy solution. There are solutions, it's just not simple, which is what I really want. It's a very simple and elegant solution. Okay, so now we can go back to the emulator, rerun the helpy application, ask for help, and now it's saying, oh, bad argument to select item. Now, it doesn't even make any sense because it's saying the operation select list item cannot accept the following arguments, which doesn't seem to make any sense because it says right here, open paren 21 space 56 close paren, which is how a list is displayed, and then a 1. Why can't I select the first item out of a list with only 2 items? The problem is this part here, the 21 and the 56 in parentheses, that's really just a string. Okay? it is not a list. I cannot select an item from a list when the first argument is not even a list. That is the problem. So we are running up against a limitation that has to do with how a list is translated into a CSV row and translated back to a list. It's an internal issue, with App Inventor, because list to CSV row was never intended to deal with nested lists. In other words, lists where an item can be a list by itself. So we are now running up against a limit here. Now, if you know that this is all that you have to do, this is the kind of embedding you have to do, then there's an easy solution to that. Okay, the easy solution, if you know that you only have one level of nested lists, the solution would be like this. Okay, so it's not hard. I mean, it's a pretty easy solution, but once again, it's very limited because you can only deal with one level of embedded lists in this case. The solution is to use, instead of using list to CSV row, you can use list to CSV table. Okay, because when you use table, then you can deal with a second level of lists. But that is a very limited solution. It's not going to be general, because what if you have a list inside a list inside a list? Then it doesn't work anymore. Okay, and I've been thinking along, basically, how do we fix this problem? And I've been looking into multiple solutions, and I still could not come up with an easy way to deal with this particular issue.
There's no check function to see if something's a list.
Yes, there is.
There is.
Yep. You could do something like that. Okay, I was on my way of doing something like exactly that. You can see I have encode thing, and in encode thing, I have a way to see if something is a list and whether something is a number. If it's not a list and not a number, it has to be text, regular text, right? Yep.
Can you use TinyDB?
Can I use TinyDB? But there are two different apps. TinyDB cannot communicate across apps.
Oh.
So I thought about many ways that I can think of to solve this problem. One other thing is I don't know whether it will work or not, is to put a quoted list inside a quoted list, but I think that it may not be able to handle the nested double quotes correctly.
I think if you were to rewrite or write your own function for converting things to CSV, can you do that recursively so that it checks to see if something's a list, and then just concatenates things itself with commas, and add like a marker at the beginning of a sublist, like when it finds a sublist, it dumps in a character and then functions as a sublist marker, and then
this is where I'm starting here.
yeah.
You can see the encode list is calling encode list itself.
Gotcha.
When the thing itself is a list, it will just recursively call itself to do the encoding. But the problem with the encoding is it's still going to interfere because it doesn't have the understanding of nesting. We still need the ability to handle nesting in order to get this to work.
You can't use some kind of user-defined control character. You can't use a user-defined control character, like throw in one instance of the pound sign or something and say that's going to start my nested list.
But what if your actual text has a pound sign? You have to escape that one too.
You're right.
So it becomes a more general, escaping, type of code. Yep.
First, just convert it from CSV to list. Then iterate through it, looking for any known symbols that indicate a list. Translate it into CSV and back to a list, and add it to, or delete that segment, and add it to it. Then restart it, and just keep on doing it until there's no indications of a list left.
Okay, so what you're saying, parse everything until you see the open paren, which is the indication that we have an embedded list.
Yeah, so just one time all the way through. Then we just run through that list again to see if there's any indications of a list. Find it, take out that chunk, re-add it as a list, and just keep on doing it until there's nothing left.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Okay, so basically what you're saying is we start with okay, let's say this is the original list, okay? So the original list has a number, a sub-list of 32, 64, and let's say that's my entire list. This list to CSV row will give me 21, comma, double quote again, but this time, this embedded list will just be by itself, which is 32 and 64, double quote. This is what list to CSV will give me. So you're saying that on the other side, I would first convert this back into a list like this.
Yes.
So it become a list of exactly just 21, but the second item is going to be a string, which is starting with an open paren, 32, 64, close paren, double quote, and end list. Okay, so now I scan the first one and say, are you a string that looks like a list? No, you're not. Are you a string that looks like a list? Yes, you are. So now I process this one, but how do I process it? Because the way I process it is, the first thing I have to do is to get rid of the parentheses, change the space to a comma, then I can feed it back through CSV, a list from CSV, and do the rest. But what if this thing has an embedded list by itself?
Then we just rescan the entire thing.
But the problem is, if this thing has an embedded list, in other words, okay, let's say there's a problem here. Okay, it's I know how to solve that problem, but it's not going to be a very easy one. Okay, so we have so if we have a embedded list here, 64, 72, close, and
how about this? Do a string check to see if the first character is a open parenthesis and the last character is open parenthesis, and extract everything in between.
Okay, so now you're looking for the first and the last character.
Yes.
That will work. Yep.
A faster option might be to create a header file for your list.
Say again?
Create a header segment that has the structure of the list. It says like, okay, so this way you can do it with any characters in one pass. If you say, okay, when you start reading this, there's going to be a header. It's going to say the first three entries are all on the list, and the second 4 entries are in a sub-list. And you can code that in any string of letters.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, and then you like say, okay, ampersand start, ampersand stop. It runs those 2 ampersands, and then after that it just goes based on whatever you want.
Yeah, because this approach still has one little minor issue that makes it kind of difficult, because I can now get rid of the first and the last parentheses, and then put commas where the spaces are. But that means the first list item is 32, which is good. The second list item is going to be open paren 64 as one single item. Because it doesn't know, it has to go from the open paren all the way to the closed paren. It is comma separated. As soon as it encountered this comma, it would chuck this off by itself.
Possibly extract all of them before adding commas to it?
You will have to do the recursive call and basically say, you have to locate, you have to do parenthesis counting, basically. That's what you need to do, is to do parenthesis counting to look for the lowest level, and then from that you work your way back up again. I have something similar like that already. In here, I use a prefix of L to specify it's a list, and in everything under that, I use a space to separate the item, and then the whole thing I was planning to use URL encode, because if you use URL encode, it will get rid of the spaces. It will just substitute space with %20, and it will do all the escaping correctly, because if you have a %, it will escape % itself into %, and then the actual ASCII code for % itself. So it does everything beautifully, except I don't have a decode mechanism. I just realized that the web component only does the encoding part, but it doesn't do the decoding part. So I will have to implement the decoding part if I were to use this mechanism to do the escaping, because it has URI encode, but it doesn't have URI decode, which is a problem. And I looked into the other ones too. I looked into JSON text decode. So that means I only have to write the encode part to get it to work, which may actually be the best option, is to write my own encode, which only has to appear on one side, and then the decode is already done, so I don't have to implement the decode part. The encoding part is always easier. Decoding is a little bit harder.
How about you get a web file that is saved as a file, or decode HTML text?
Decode HTML text, does not deal with the parentheses correctly, because it's only going to escape ampersand, less than, greater than, that sort of thing. But parentheses is okay. It's okay to have parentheses in actual HTML text, so it doesn't encode and decode parentheses correctly. So either way you look at it, we are looking at an issue of encoding and decoding. On the other hand, if you know that you're not going to have embedded list, you'll be fine. I mean, one level of list to CSV is going to solve the problem. It's just that when you want it to be a very general approach, then we have a problem, because now we need the encoding and the decoding part to deal with nested list, which always involves some kind of escape mechanism. Yep.
Same thought on that, but when you're going through and replacing spaces, stop at a
Open paren,
and then just wait until you reach the end before replacing any others.
Yep. So you're now starting to do actual parsing, which is okay. I mean, I can deal with that. It's just it's not as simple as I want. I just want something that is just making use of stuff that is already provided. But apparently, there's no easy way to do it, unfortunately. Okay, decode a given JSON encoded value to produce a corresponding app inventor value. So a JSON list XYZ decodes into the list XYZ, a JSON object with name A and name B decoded as name : B and closed by curly braces decode to a list AB, that is a list containing two element list AB. Okay. So this may be the best way to do it, is to write my own encode to deal with to encode it into something like this, because it looks like this can deal with a nesting of lists. But I haven't looked into that yet. Okay. So are there any questions? Is anyone planning to use this approach, to use one app to start another app, so you don't have to deal with the concept of a library?
The problem I see with this is that then you have to get whoever's using it to install 2 apps or more.
Yes.
One app, and that's a little weird. It's like, oh, I want one app, oh, here's 6.
Well, it's a very typical way of dealing with a client-server program, where the client will send a request to the server, but the client has the option to continue to do whatever until the server replies, and then you can go, oh, by the way, I just got something back from the server, and let me process what the server has replied to back to me. So that becomes a much more general client-server type of communication, if I choose to implement it this way, which is not a bad thing from the perspective of learning a different style of programming, but it is more convoluted because now you have to chop up the flow of your program. Yep.
It is better to wait for Java.
Hmm?
To wait for Java. To code in Java.
Coding in Java?
Yeah.
If you code in Java, you have the advantage of being able to have libraries.
Yeah, so,
However, However, the concept of a library in Java does not extend across applications. Okay, I'll give you an example. So I'll erase this part here, and it will say. Okay, so I'm going to explain why this can still be in Java. You solve a lot of the problems because you have the concept of libraries and linking and whatnot. Okay, so let's say you have a very rich library that you have written. Let's say this represents the size of your library. Okay, and this represents the logic that is specific to a certain app. Under normal circumstances, this is not a disproportional kind of representation, because most people over time will develop a huge, rich library of stuff that that comes in handy. So this part is just specific to a certain app. So this is not a problem. Now you write a different app and using the same library to link against the other app. So now we have app A, and then we have app B. But when you upload it, app A, and this is the entire app A, the APK file will include its own copy of the library that you have linked with app A. When you upload the APK file of app B, this is app B. In other words, you still have a chunk of code that is duplicate. It's just that from the perspective of writing the code, it is a whole lot easier. But from the perspective of taking up space, at runtime, on the Android side, it is still wasting space because it doesn't know how to share your own code across two applications. That part is still not shared. So yes, it solves one part of the problem, but it does not solve the other part of the problem, which is dealing with the shared code, because you're not doing runtime sharing, you're doing compile time sharing. But granted, if you have a device that's large enough, it's not an issue. Yep. Okay. So, any other questions? Have you guys run up against any type of questions or difficulties in your project? No questions?
Yep. I have a question about the very first thing we saw this morning. That AI2 does not work in Internet Explorer.
Right.
What doesn't work?
I do not know. It doesn't say.
I'm guessing the actual interface for the blocks editor.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm guessing.
I hate to put it this way, but I really don't care.
Okay, so nothing shows up.
No, I just restarted Google Chrome. So let's go back to here and see whether it has a place where I can click and check. It keeps complaining my profile did not, get started correctly. I don't know why that is the case. Start over again. Your profile could not be opened correctly. Some features may not be available. That's okay. That's not a problem. I just want to get to a certain website. There we go. Okay, so there's some place I can click here. So let's go ahead and click it and see what happens. AI Daemon renamed to AI Starter, and this part does not explain why it doesn't work in.
No, it's just saying they're just making a note that it doesn't work in the Explorer, and also we've renamed this.
Okay, so this part has nothing to do with the fact that it doesn't work with Internet Explorer. Just don't use Internet Explorer in general.
Yeah, ever.
Even though it's bundled with Windows, don't use it. It's just not as good of a browser as Google Chrome or Firefox.
How do you upgrade to the newer level of Google Chrome?
You just go to Google Chrome. Google Chrome does its own update by itself. Yeah, it does it automatically. It keeps itself up to date.
Well, I get a message all the time. It says Google Chrome has crashed, relaunch, and keep hitting relaunch, I still get that message. Google Chrome has crashed.
Are you on Chrome now?
No, I'm just at home.
Okay, I'll see you real quick. So if you go here.
Yeah, if you have that problem at
When
home,
you say go here, where is here?
See the mouse icon? Mouse moving around? Okay, you go up here to the upper right.
Right. Say
You
that
go-
to the right, it says go here, and then something shows
And
up.
then you go to About Chrome. And it will tell you whether it's up to date or not. If it's not up to date, you can click another button, which will be populated here. And it will update it manually if you need to. But this one's already up to date.
you can also uninstall Google Chrome and then reinstall it, in case there's an issue with the installation itself.
Although by the sound of it, maybe is installation of Windows library issue.
It can be a lot of different
Yeah.
issues. Yep. Can be an infection, that can cause, lots of issues too. So anyway, any other questions? Have you guys run into any type of problems that you want to bring up? No?
Question.
Yep.
How come 1.0 does not have that build button?
Because they renamed it. In version 1.0, it is called, is it download? They just call it differently. Okay, this is version 1.0. Okay, fine. In version 1.0, they call that package for blah blah blah. Same thing, same concept, same idea. They just call it a different thing. So instead of saying build, you go to package for phone and then you say download to this computer. It will serve exactly the same purpose. It will still download the APK file and do exactly the same thing.
Do you need to use that if you don't have an actual phone that's using the emulator?
If you do it the way I do it, this would be the way to do it, because I'm starting up my emulator completely independent to App Inventor. I'm not even using App Inventor setup in any way, so that would be the way to do it. If you're using App Inventor setup, then you don't have to do it this way, because you can always go to the blocks editor and then start up the emulator from there. So it depends on how you want to do it. Because if you want to do it the quote-unquote easy way, then you start up the blocks editor. Within the blocks editor, you have a way to connect to different devices or to start up an emulator. So you can do it that way. But if you start up an emulator from the Android software development kit itself, which is like what I'm doing here in class, then you will have to download the APK file and then upload the APK file and install it in the emulator. And either way works. It's just a matter of which way do you want to, how you want to do it. The second way, which is the way that I have been doing things, will also work in App Inventor too, which is the nice part about it. It also makes use of the latest Android operating system in the emulator, which is good, because the other one uses Android 2.3, which is a really outdated version of Android. Any other questions?
Question.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so say that you have a maximum number of values that you want the user to be able to store in your app.
Okay.
Okay, and each one of those values is to be associated with a checkbox to decide whether it gets returned back to in TinyDB to another screen. How would you do that so that each time, say like the user inputs something, right, and then it assigns it to one of the checkbox texts?
Okay.
How do you make it so that it will assign it to a different one if the user does it a second time?
I'm not grasping, what you want to do.
Alright. Just say I, like in my app.
Okay.
So the first time I go to the screen that allows me to enter a city name.
Okay.
Right? I enter a city name, it saves it to the first checkbox. Or it puts the text of that response
Okay.
on the first checkbox. Right? I'm still inside of the place where I enter a city name. now I want it to enter a different one and have it assign it to a different checkbox.
Ah, okay.
When that checkbox is checked, that's the value I want it to return, not the.
Okay. Can you do you have the restriction of only having one checkbox checked at any particular time? So instead of using a checkbox, would you consider using a list picker instead?
Well, I return it. Yeah, I mean, right now it's set up to return as a list because I haven't figured out how to do that.
Right.
But it may just be, like, really what I want it to be is that you can either pick from a list or you can just set it, it returns back, and then it automatically displays.
So let me show you what a list box can do for you. Because it sounds like a list box is a more appropriate item instead of using a bunch of check boxes.
Well, the thing is that I have it already set up so that, say, like the first time you run it after, like say you pick cities already and you close the app. When you open it, okay, on the first screen, you can pick from cities from a list picker. But on a second screen, I just want it to be able to, like, if you go to that second screen, it returns the value back and then runs the web viewer. Like
what does the second screen return? The value.
It could like with the checkbox checked, I want it to return that value and display.
So there is a value associated with a particular city.
Right.
And that's what the second screen is returning.
Right. It also, the second screen also stores that value that you enter into the list picker. So like,
okay.
They return it.
Let me take a look at your app because it's a little bit harder to describe it. Yeah. I'll take a look at your app. When we start the lab portion.
Okay. Well, then I have a second question. How do you limit the number of values someone can put into the list picker?
How do you limit the value
you only,
in a text box? I'm assuming.
Well, yeah. Like say you only want the list picker to be able to store 5 values.
Okay.
How do you limit that? What is one way to limit that?
Okay, the list in a list picker is up to you to decide, how many items you wanted to store. Okay, let me show you exactly what I mean by that. Okay, so I have a little list picker here. When I go to blocks and go to list picker, these are all the things that I can do with a list picker. And one of the many things I can do to it is to set the element, which is a list, to something else. So what you want to do is to limit the size of that list to 5, right? So you have to do it entirely using your own logic to make sure it does not exceed 5.
Okay. And then just send a notification to the user that they reached the max number of values.
Right.
So how would the user go about deleting one of those values?
Okay, do you want the user to have the ability to select which one to delete, or do you want to delete it?
Which one, like have the user have it?
You make another list picker. No, I'm not kidding.
I know.
Use another list picker that is a specifier of which one they want to remove. Okay, there are several ways to do it. One way is to use a single list picker, and they pick whatever item they want to pick. And then you have another button to say, what do you want to do with this item from the list picker? If the user says click delete at that point, you have a delete button. When the user click delete at that point, then you can look up, okay, which element was selected from the list picker, and then you go to the corresponding list, remove that item, refresh the list picker to the new list without the item that is just removed, and do it that way.
Gotcha. So with the list picker elements, how do you just essentially, like when the program starts, would you initialize that, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You can initialize it, with hard-coded data, or you can load it from your TinyDB if your TinyDB stores that information.
My question would be then, can the list picker, this is probably a little bit more complicated, but my second question would be, and I'm sure it's possible, could the list picker pull from location data the name of the city? like using GPS data for that, and it gives you the name of the city. Just get rid of everything but the name of the city, and store that value into this picker. Let's say on visualization.
I think you should be able to do it.
As long as you format it correctly.
Yep.
I know it sounds really complicated.
No, as long as your code can do it, you can make it happen in the initialized event of the screen.
Okay.
So you just have to position the initialization at the right place in order to populate your list picker.
Okay.
Yeah, so that should work. You just have to handle the case when there's nothing selected, all the exception cases, like the first time running your app. What are you going to do when you do not have anything stored in TinyDB?
Well, my thought is that using location data is going to return like a lat longitude. I don't know if it actually returns city to.
Have you tested your data?
I haven't tested to see it yet.
Okay, so you are saying...
Yeah, you should find out what you get.
So you're using, under sensors, you're using location sensor. So if you're using location sensor, then these are the things you can do with location
Yeah,
sensor.
that's exactly what I thought.
And what are you using or intend to use?
It's more of a question. I haven't started.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I haven't started.
So you might need to do some experimentation, because when your application starts and the location sensor or the GPS is not active at the time, it might take a little bit of time before location sensor actually returns any type of information that's useful to you. So you may not get any useful data right away.
Yeah, I've already tested that, and you actually have to run through it because it may just give a coordinate of 0, 0 a few times, even though that it's like, this is your current location it returns. So
So you have to basically you have to have multiple status change or location change events before it settles down to an actual useful.
Yeah, I decided against using that and just checked every 1 second.
So you use a timer instead,
Yeah.
To trigger the checking and not use the status change.
That way I
event.
can like check for 15 seconds. Then if I don't find anything, just error out and return it back to the previous screen there.
Okay, so in your case, if you check it every so often,
Yeah.
which call do you use to check? Do you use the latitude from address, or
Oh no, I
you trigger
scroll
this?
down.
Okay.
Longitude, latitude, right there.
You mean here?
Down 1.
Okay, so you're just grabbing these two.
Yes. Then I just check to see if both of them are not 0, 0.
Okay.
Because you could theoretically be at 0 and 1, but very unlikely for both.
Okay. And you can also check current address if it translates to a certain address.
Also 0, 0 motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just don't use mine right in the ocean.
I mean, maybe if you're on a boat.
It's like, where did I put my car?
Yeah. A boat. Okay. All right. So I can take a look at your other thing, when I come over and take a look at your app. Any other questions? Any other issues that you guys run into with your app?
I
Yep.
got it working before, but I don't remember what I wrote. In order to bring up the Google Maps activity, supply the information, and put a marker there, it doesn't seem to be working now. And I didn't make a note of what I did before. So I did like geo colon the coordinate, and it loads up, but it just looks like my current position in Google Maps.
Because Google Maps might have changed its API too, because it just recently changed it maybe 2 days ago. So you might run into an internal Google product compatibility issue.
Well, that's like a base feature, so I would very much doubt that would change.
Have you tried it out with a normal browser? Just code exactly the same way, but using a normal browser and see what happens.
Yes, I've done it in the normal browser, but I'm using the Google Maps app itself,
Okay.
which should use this fairly the same parameters after the geocolon.
Okay.
But maybe the location I'm starting and the location I am right now are sort of overlapping. Maybe that's an issue. I'll try to do a mock location or hard encode a location to start with.
Okay. All right. Any other issues?
Sometimes I get an error message that says you have to restart your app. How far back
Okay,
go to
wait,
restart
hold
the
on,
app?
rewind. Are you getting it inside the browser or are you getting it inside the emulator?
When I'm in the block editor or whatever, I get that message that says restart your app. Well, what is a restart? Do you go out and start App Inventor all over again, or do you go back to
It depends
design and
on
click
where you're
something?
getting that message, so if you're getting that message inside the emulator, in other words, when you get it from inside here, that's inside the Android operating system. And I don't know why it wants you to restart the app, because normally it restarts it, for you. But you can always, just use the back button to get out of your app and then just, start your app again. I'm assuming it's inside Android that you're getting that
I
message.
think that's the error message for the emulator. If the emulator and the browser can't talk properly, it may throw that message
In
Where's
which-
the back button?
in the browser itself.
The back button is this button here,
Where?
right here, where my mouse pointer is.
Yeah, he's using the.
Oh, there. Okay, yeah.
But in your case, it's a different one because you're using the other emulator. Okay, if you use the other
Here's
emulator.
the curved arrow. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, if you're using the other Android, then you're running this one here. Okay, so if you're using version 2.3, which is the older emulator, this is what you should be seeing. So it would be this button.
Okay.
But I don't know where you're getting the message. I'm assuming it's coming from Android, but if it's coming from App Inventor itself, like from here, then it's a different thing. All right. So if there are no other questions, I'm gonna go. I'll stop the recording and get my